When alien taxonomists arrived to catalog Earth's predator-prey relationships, they discovered that size doesn't matter when it comes to Earth's food chain, especially when dealing with a particularly ambitious bullfrog named Professor Ribbit. The Keplerian taxonomists had been methodically documenting Earth's species for 3 standard cycles when their carefully ordered universe imploded, or more accurately, when they watched a frog eat a snake. This is clearly an error in observation. Chief taxonomist Val NX clicked, their crystalline appendages flickering with distress patterns. According to universal size-based predation laws, the smaller organism cannot consume the larger organism. It violates fundamental galactic order. Dr. Thora Blackwood, Earth's leading herpetologist, pinched the bridge of her nose and wondered, not for the first time, how she'd ended up defending the honor of frogs to alien scientists. Her prized research subject, an American bullfrog she dubbed Professor Ribbit, sat smugly in his specialized habitat, digestive bulge clearly visible. "I assure you," Thora said, trying to maintain diplomatic composure, "that what you witnessed is completely normal Earth biology. Professor Ribbit here regularly consumes prey larger than himself. It's one of his species' defining characteristics." The secondary taxonomist, Zinviex, made a sound like shattering glass. But our entire classification system is based on the galactic size predation hierarchy. You can't just have small things eating big things. There are rules. Professor Ribbit chose that moment to let out a resonant croak that Thora swore sounded smugly satisfied. The snake's tail was still visible, slowly disappearing into his mouth like a particularly morbid spaghetti noodle. "Perhaps," Thora suggested, pulling up her research data, "you'd be interested in seeing our documentation of other surprising predator-prey relationships? We have octopi hunting seagulls, praying mantises catching hummingbirds, spiders eating snakes." The taxonomist's crystalline forms began vibrating at a frequency that made the laboratory windows rattle. Their color shifted from a professional blue-green to what Thora had learned was their species' equivalent of horrified mauve. "Dr. Blackwood," Val next managed, their voice crackling with static, "are you suggesting that Earth's entire ecosystem operates in defiance of established galactic order?" "Not défiance," Thora corrected, while Professor Ribbit finished his snack with what she considered unnecessary theatrical flair. "We simply have a more flexible approach to the food chain." The taxonomists huddled together, their crystals chiming in what seemed to be a heated discussion. Meanwhile, Professor Ribbit positioned himself at the front of his habitat, displaying his impressive bulk with all the dignity of a tenured academic who'd just proven a controversial theorem. What none of them knew, not the taxonomists, not Thora, and certainly not Professor Ribbit, was that this small disruption in galactic scientific understanding was about to cascade into something much, much bigger. Because somewhere out there in the vast expanse of space, a species that had built their entire civilization on the assumption of their place in the food chain was about to discover that size didn't always matter. And Professor Ribbit was about to become Earth's most unlikely military advisor. The Keplerians' report to the Galactic Scientific Council caused what could only be described as an academic meltdown. Entire departments of xenobiologists demanded peer review. 3 separate prestigious universities requested immediate research grants, and the Council's chief arbitrator of natural order threatened to resign over what he called a fundamental assault on the laws of biological hierarchy. "You don't understand," Thora explained to the emergency session of the Council, while Professor Ribbit observed from his newly installed diplomatic habit. "Earth's evolution didn't follow your size-based rules because it didn't know about them. Our species adapted based on opportunity, not protocol." The council chamber, a vast amphitheater designed to accommodate beings from every recognized species, hummed with agitated discord. Professor Ribbit, apparently sensing his moment, pressed himself against the transparent wall of his "Perhaps," Thora suggested, recognizing the glint in her amphibian colleague's eye, "a demonstration would help clarify our point." The council's security director, a towering arthropodian named Sheath Va, chittered in agreement. Yes, evidence-based discussion. Very proper, very scientific. Release the standard tests." What the council didn't realize, and what Thora had tried to explain, was that standard test subject on their scale meant releasing a serpentine creature roughly twice Professor Ribbit's size. The kind of size differential that, according to their precious hierarchy, should have made the frog prey, not predator. Professor Ribbit's reaction could only be described as professional interest with a side of appetite. Now, as you can see, Shithfa began, the smaller organism will naturally attempt to escape, while the larger. They never finished the sentence. Professor Ribbit, with the timing of a practiced showman, launched himself across the chamber. What followed was either the most impressive display of predatory efficiency or the most horrifying violation of galactic scientific principles, depending on who you are. Sweet mother of photosynthesis. Someone shrieked from the upper tiers. It's eating it back. Actually, Thora noted, unable to completely hide her pride. That's completely normal frog behavior. They prefer to eat their prey head first. Helps with the swallowing process. The council chamber erupted into chaos. Several members began demanding immediate reclassification of Earth's entire ecosystem. Others called for a complete revision of the galactic size predation hierarchy. One particularly agitated group suggested quarantining the entire solar system until they could make sense. Professor Ribbit, having finished his impromptu lunch, settled back into his habitat with all the satisfaction of a university professor who'd just conclusively proven their thesis. This changes everything, the chief arbitrator declared, their voice trembling. If size is not the determining factor, if smaller organisms can successfully prey upon larger ones, our entire understanding of universal predation patterns must be reconsidered. Thora tried to interject, to explain that this was just one of many fascinating examples of Earth's diverse predator-prey relationship, but the Council was already spiraling into increasingly theoretical discussions about the implications for galactic taxonomy. What none of them realized was that news of this demonstration was already spreading through subspace channels, reaching the edges of known space, including the territory of a certain species that had built their entire civilization around the assumption of their natural supremacy based on size. Professor Ribbit, contentedly digesting his latest meal, seemed unaware that he just triggered what would soon be known as the Great Taxonomic Crisis of 2387. Or perhaps, Thora thought, watching him settle into his favorite floating lily pad, he knew exactly what he'd. Either way, Earth's most unexpected predator was about to become the center of a galactic controversy that would redefine more than just scientific classification systems. While the Council was still debating the philosophical implications of frogs eating snakes, the Serpentine Collective made their arrival in Earth's solar system was heralded by ships that looked like metallic anacondas, each one stretching kilometers across space. "We have received your taxonomic broadcast," their first message announced, transmitted simultaneously to Earth and the Galactic Council. "We find your claims of predatory inversion both insulting and threatening to established cosmic order." Admiral Cairo Winters of Earth Defense Command stared at the tactical display, where a dozen Serpentine warships were coiling through the asteroid belt. "Dr. Black," she said, turning to where Thora stood with Professor Ribbit's portable habitat, "please tell me your frog didn't just start an interstellar incident." "Technically," Thora replied, while Professor Ribbit practiced his most intimidating croak, "they started it by insisting on rigid size-based hierarchies. We just demonstrated an alternative perspective." The collective's second message was less diplomatic. "We are the apex predators of the galaxy. Our species evolved from the mightiest constrictors in the Carina Nebula. We will not allow lesser beings to challenge the natural order." "They're preparing to strike," Lieutenant Vex announced from the sensor station. "Their ships are displaying constriction patterns similar to hunting behavior." Admiral Winters pinched the bridge of her nose. "So we're about to go to war because an alien species is having an existential crisis over a Professor Ribbit," Thora corrected automatically, then caught herself. "But essentially, yeah." That's when Professor Ribbit did something unexpected. He tapped deliberately on his habitat's wall, drawing attention to the tactical display. Using a series of hops and movements that Thora had learned to interpret over years of research, he began indicating patterns in the collective ship formation. "Admiral," Thora said slowly, "I think he's identifying their hunting behaviors. Look, they're moving exactly like constrictor snakes, just on a cosmic scale." Admiral Winters leaned forward, studying the patterns. "Are you suggesting we take tactical advice from an amphibian who's successfully predated on creatures twice his size for years?" Thora pointed out. "Who better to understand how to counter constrictor tactics The Admiral stared at Professor Ribbit, who met her gaze with the steady confidence of a predator who knew exactly where he stood in the food chain, wherever he damn well pleased. The collective's giving us 1 hour to surrender and accept our proper place in the natural order, Lieutenant Vex reported. Admiral Winters made a decision that would later be debated in military academies across the galaxy. Dr. Blackwood, how quickly can you get more frogs? More frogs? If one frog can disrupt their entire worldview, imagine what an army could do. The Admiral's eyes gleamed. Professor Ribbit has already proven he understands their tactics. Can he teach other frogs? Thora looked at her research subject, who had positioned himself in what she recognized as his teaching pose, the same one he used when demonstrating hunting techniques to younger frogs in her lab. Admiral, she said, a slow smile spreading across her face.
I have no idea what frogs are capable of learning.
Professor Ribbit let out a deep, resonant croak that seemed to shake the command center's windows. Even the hardened military personnel felt a shiver run down their spines. Send word to the Admiral Winters commanded. Tell them Earth is activating its biological defense protocols, and someone get Dr. Blackwood whatever she needs to turn her frog professor into a drill sergeant. As the command center erupted into activity, Thora could have sworn she saw Professor Ribbit rub his front appendages together in what looked suspiciously like anticipation. The Serpentine Collective was about to learn a crucial lesson about Earth's ecosystem. Sometimes the most dangerous predator isn't the biggest, it's the one nobody expects. And Professor Ribbit had a lot to teach about defying expectations. The conversion of the Argentinian Amphibian Research Center into the first ever Frog Special Forces training facility happened in record. What was once a peaceful wetland sanctuary now resembled a cross between a military boot camp and an extremely ambitious combat-ready amphibians, Thora muttered, watching Professor Ribbit supervise the training from his elevated command. If someone had told me this would be my career path, I'd have sent them for a psychiatric evaluation. The training pool before her was filled with what the military had dubbed Enhanced Tactical Amphibian Units, ETAUs for short. Each frog was equipped with a specially designed microsuit that amplified their natural abilities. The Science Division, led by Dr. Zara Blackhawk, had outdone themselves. The suits enhanced their jumping capability by 300%, Zara explained, adjusting her holographic display. Plus, they're equipped with specialized tongues mods that can penetrate serpentine armor. Though I have to admit, designing a targeting system for a frog's tongue was unique. Professor Ribbit's first graduating class consisted of 50 American bullfrogs, chosen for their size and aggressive hunting. The current exercise involved capturing holographic projections of serpentine soldiers, and the results were impressive, if slightly Recruit hopscotch, Thora called out as one of the frogs missed its target. Remember Professor Ribbit's technique. Lead with the tongue, commit with the frog in question, sporting a metallic green combat suit, adjusted its approach and successfully captured its target on the next attempt. Professor Ribbit let out an approving croak from his command. Ma'am. Lieutenant Vex appeared at Thora's side, looking slightly uncomfortable. The Goliath frog contingent from Africa has arrived. And, well, you should probably see this yourself. The Goliath frogs, nearly the size of house cats even before their enhancement suits, had already organized themselves into what appeared to be assaults. Their commander, a battle-scarred specimen dubbed General Worthington, was demonstrating a complex maneuver that involved using their powerful legs to launch smaller frogs at target. They've developed their own tactics, Zara whispered, frantically taking notes. The bigger frogs are acting as organic artillery platforms for the smaller ones. That's not in any training manual. Professor Ribbit, observing from above, gave what Thora recognized as his scholarly approval croak. He'd been working with General Worthington and, together, they'd created what the tactical officers were calling Operation Leapfrog, a complex battle strategy that utilized the various frog species' different abilities. The Poison Dart Frog Division, housed in a separate high-security facility, was perhaps the most Their naturally toxic secretions had been carefully collected and weaponized, turning them into what one nervous officer called living biochemical warfare units. They trained in specialized sealed environments, their tiny combat suits glowing with warning indicators. Status report. Admiral Winters commanded, arriving for the daily briefing. Her eyes widened slightly at the sight of a squadron of tree frogs practicing vertical assault maneuvers on the facility's wall. The ETAUs are exceeding all expectations, Thora reported. Professor Ribbit's training methods are unconventional but effective. The frogs are learning to coordinate their attacks, use their enhanced abilities, and, most importantly, exploit the Serpentine Collective's natural weakness. As if to demonstrate, Professor Ribbit launched himself from his platform. His custom-made command suit, he executed a perfect demonstration of the Ribbit maneuver, a complex attack pattern that utilized a frog's natural ability to strike from multiple angles in rapid succession. The collective won't expect this, Admiral Winters mused, watching as the other frogs immediately began practicing. They've based their entire strategy on being the largest predator. They won't be prepared for an army of smaller, more agile opponents, especially opponents who've evolved specifically to hunt snake-like creatures, Thora added. Every frog here is basically a living anti-snake. The facility's alarm system suddenly blared. Lieutenant Vex rushed over, tablet in hand. The collective ships are moving. They're taking up attack positions around the moon. Admiral Winters straightened her uniform. Well, Doctor, it seems graduation day just got moved up. Is your amphibian army? Thora looked at Professor Ribbit, who had already positioned himself at the head of it. The assembled frogs, each in their specialized combat suits, waited with the patient stillness that made them such effective Ready? Thora smiled grimly. Admiral, I think the real question is, are the Serpentines ready for... As the facility erupted into pre-battle preparation, Professor Ribbit led his troops in what would become known as the Battle Croak, a sound that would soon haunt the nightmares of every Serpentine warrior in the galaxy. The first official confrontation between Earth's Amphibian Special Forces and the Serpentine Collective occurred during what was supposed to be a final diplomatic negotiation aboard the neutral space station. Ambassador Slith of the Collective had insisted on the meeting, presumably to give Earth one last chance to accept their natural place in the cosmic order. What they hadn't expected was Earth's choice of diplomatic security detail. You bring prey species as guards? Ambassador Slith's tongue flickered in amusement as Professor Ribbit and his elite squad took up positions around the conference. Each frog wore ceremonial combat suits in Earth Defense Force colors, complete with diplomatic About that classification, Thora began, but it was too late. One of the junior Serpentine diplomats, apparently trying to demonstrate their species' superiority, made what historians would later call the Great Diplomatic Blunder of 2387. They attempted to snatch Professor Ribbit with their cybernetically enhanced. What followed was either the shortest diplomatic incident in galactic history or the most efficient hostile takeover of a peace conference, depending on who you... Professor Ribbit, moving with the practiced ease of a predator, who'd spent years perfecting his tech, not only dodged the attack, but proceeded to demonstrate exactly why Earth's amphibians had earned their reputation. The junior diplomat found themselves expertly immobilized by a combination of tactical tongue deployment and what the combat logs would later describe as extreme prejudice in amphibian combat technique. Impossible! Ambassador Slith reared back, their cybernetic enhancements whirring in distress. The smaller cannot defeat the larger. It violates all natural law. Natural law? Lieutenant Vex, who'd been quietly monitoring the situation, pulled up a holographic display. Perhaps you'd be interested in some Earth nature document. We have quite a collection of frogs consuming various snake species. The Serpentine delegation watched in horror as the display showed clip after clip of Earth's amphibians, casually defying their understanding of predator-prey relationship. Professor Ribbit, still maintaining his professionally appropriate restraint of the junior diplomat, managed to look smugly educated. This is propaganda. Ambassador Slith's scales had taken on a distinctly pale hue. No civilized species would allow such disorder in their ecosystem. Earth's ecosystem isn't about order, Thora explained, while Professor Ribbit's squad demonstrated their perfect military formation. It's about adaptation, evolution, finding unexpected solutions to survival challenges. The ambassador's response was cut short by an urgent communication from their fleet. The smaller vessels, they're everywhere. They're attaching themselves to our ships. They're trying to eat our hull plating. Thora glanced at her tablet, where she could see the live feed of Earth's first deployment of the Tree Frog Space Infantry. The specialized units, taking advantage of their natural ability to stick to surfaces, were wreaking havoc on the Serpentine fleet's external sensors. "Ambassador," Thora said calmly, "I suggest you consider very carefully whether you want to continue this confrontation. Professor Ribbit here is actually one of our more diplomatically inclined officers." As if to emphasize her point, the junior diplomat let out a strangled squeak as Professor Ribbit adjusted his hold with professional precision. The ambassador's cybernetic enhancements whirred as they processed this new reality. Their species had never encountered predators that defied the size hierarchy. They had no protocols for this situation. We will need to consult with our high command," Ambassador Slith finally managed. "Of course," Thora smiled. "Professor Ribbit would be happy to provide a detailed demonstration of Earth's predator-prey relationships while you deliberate." The speed with which the Serpentine delegation requested a recess would later set a new record in galactic diplomatic history. The Serpentine Collective, their pride wounded and their fundamental beliefs challenged, launched their attack at dawn Earth Standard Time. Their massive ships moved in classic constrictor patterns, attempting to encircle Earth's defense fleet. "Here we go," Admiral Winters announced from the bridge of the EDF Leapfrog, Earth's first amphibian-focused combat vessel. "Deploy the ETAUs." Launch pods erupted from Earth's defensive positions, each containing squadrons of combat-ready frogs. Professor Ribbit, leading from his command module, gave the signal that initiated Operation Lilypad. "Combat units report ready," Lieutenant Vex announced, monitoring the tactical display. "Tree frog squadrons in position. Goliath units standing by. Poison dart teams await your command." The first wave of Serpentine fighters encountered something unprecedented in galactic warfare. Formations of armored amphibians using zero gravity to enhance their already formidable jumping abilities. The tree frog squadrons, led by Captain Croaksworth, attached themselves to enemy ships with devastating efficiency. "Sir," a panicked Serpentine commander transmitted, They're disabling our sensor arrays with their tongues." Professor Ribbit's elite squad demonstrated why they'd been dubbed the Tongue Commandos, systematically neutralizing key systems with precision strikes. Their enhanced combat suits allowed them to leap from ship to ship in space, using the Serpentine vessel's own bulk against them. "General Wardington's units are in position," Thora reported, watching as the Goliath Frog squadrons implemented their part of the strategy. The massive amphibians, using their enhanced strength, began launching smaller units at strategic points on the enemy ship. The Serpentine response was chaos. Their entire combat doctrine, based on being the largest predator in any engagement, fell apart when faced with swarms of smaller, more agile opponents who showed absolutely no fear of their size. "They're breaking formation," Lieutenant Vex announced. "The enemy fleet is losing cohesion." That's when Professor Ribbit initiated Phase 2. The poison dart frog units, their suits equipped with specialized delivery systems, began targeting the Serpentine ship's environmental controls. While their natural toxins had been modified to be non-lethal, they proved remarkably effective at causing ships' crews to experience what medical officers would later describe as an overwhelming urge to hop. "This is Serpentine Command." The increasingly frantic transmissions continued. "Our soldiers are jumping. They can't stop jumping. What sorcery is this?" Admiral Winters watched as the mighty Serpentine fleet, terror of the galaxy, was systematically dismantled by what appeared to be a coordinated assault of combat amphibians. Professor Ribbit, directing operations from his command post, displayed the cool efficiency that had made him Earth's most unexpected military genius. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Vex reported, trying to maintain professional composure,
No!
"the enemy's flagship is being, well, here is no other way to say this. It's being eaten." Indeed, the specialized ETAUs had begun implementing Professor Ribbit's master strategy, treating the massive Serpentine vessels exactly like their smaller natural prey. Squadrons of combat frogs systematically consumed the ship's command and control systems, starting from the front and working their way back, just as they would with actual status report on Operation Tadpole. Admiral Winters request the infiltration units have successfully penetrated their secondary command ships, Thor confirmed. They're doing the thing with the chief. Several Serpentine vessels suddenly found their internal communication systems filled with the echoing sounds of victory, their computer systems compromised by specialized units storing data in their tactical cheek pouches. A strategy Professor Ribbit had personally. The battle reached its climax when the collective's supreme commander, watching their supposedly invincible fleet being systematically dismantled by what they had dismissed as prey species, made a desperate retreat! Retreat! They're defying the natural order. Nothing makes sense anymore. As the massive Serpentine ships began a hasty Professor Ribbit led his troops in what would become known as the Victory Ribbit, a synchronized chorus that would haunt Serpentine military academies for generations. The official surrender of the Serpentine Collective took place in what had once been their most sacred space, the Hall of Predatory Excellence. Now, somewhat ironically, it served as the perfect backdrop for their greatest paradigm. Professor, wearing what the military's PR department had dubbed his victory suit, complete with miniature medals and campaign ribbons, presided over the ceremony from a specially designed command platform. The sight of a frog officiating the surrender of a snake-based civilization would have been comical if it weren't so historically significant. The terms are quite Thora explained to the assembled Serpentine High Command. Earth simply requests that you abandon your size-based hierarchy system and acknowledge the complexity of natural predator-prey relationships. And, Admiral Winters added, trying not to smile as Professor Ribbit demonstrated his now famous victory pose, maybe update your biological text. The Galactic Council had sent representatives to witness the ceremony. The Keplerian taxonomists, still struggling to revise their classification systems, watched in fascinated horror as Professor Ribbit's elite squad performed a ceremonial display of their combat technique. We have much to learn from Earth's ecosystem, Supreme Commander Slith admitted, their cybernetic enhancements humming with what might have been embarrassment. Perhaps, size isn't everything. The aftermath of what became known as the Great Amphibian Victory transformed galactic society. The Serpentine Collective, in a stunning reversal of their previous philosophy, established the galaxy's first interspecies predation research institute. Professor Ribbit was offered a position as their chief consultant, though he preferred to conduct his lectures from the safety of a well-fortified Earth's contribution to galactic military science was revolutionary. The ETAU program expanded to include other unexpected predator species, though none quite matched the efficiency of the original frog unit. The sight of combat-suited amphibians became a common fixture at galactic peacekeeping stations. You know, Thora remarked to Admiral Winters during the first anniversary celebration of the victory, when I started my career in herpetology, I never imagined I'd end up as the diplomatic liaison to an army of combat frogs. And I never thought I'd be awarding medals to amphibians, the Admiral replied, watching as Professor Ribbit received the newly created Order of the Lily Pad, the military's highest honor for unconventional tactical excellence. The ceremony was briefly interrupted when General Wardington's squad, in a display of high spirits, demonstrated their famous synchronized predation routine. Several Serpentine diplomats fainted, but most of the galaxy's representatives had grown accustomed to Earth's unique approach to predator-prey relations. Professor Ribbit's legacy extended far beyond military achievement. His teaching methods were adopted by the Galactic Academy of Natural Sciences, where students learned that the most dangerous predator isn't always the most obvious. His memoir, Ribbit's Rules of Combat, Why Size Doesn't Matter When You Have Technique, became required reading at military academies across the galaxy. As for the future, Earth's reputation as home to the galaxy's most unpredictable predators served as an effective deterrent against any other species considering size-based dominance. The sight of a combat-suited frog was enough to make even the largest potential adversaries reconsider their Professor Ribbit himself retired to a custom-built habitat in the newly established Interplanetary Amphibian Combat Training Center, where he occasionally emerged to demonstrate his techniques to a new generation of ETAUs. His favorite lesson, delivered with a single authoritative croak, remained simple but profound. In the game of survival, it's not about being the biggest, it's about being the most ambitious. And sometimes, the most ambitious predator is the one nobody expects to be a predator at all.